Stephen Jay Gould, evolutionary biologist and Harvard PhD, was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer and given 8 months to live. After initial despair, as you can imagine, Dr. Gould did what he did best, and he went to the medical research library, and he started digging in the annals. What he found was what he thought to be a statistical loophole in the research. Armed with this feeling of normalcy around the ability to live, Stephen Jay Gould did. He lived another 20 years, beat the odds. Elsewhere, across the nation, in a rural emergency room, a man was wheeled in on the brink of death. His family couldn't tell them why, and the doctors could not determine why, and so they had to run test after test, and they were all mystified. When it looked like heaven was knocking, a family member came up to the surgeon and told them, "Hey, I think he's dying of a voodoo curse." So the surgeon obviously wanted to dig in a little deeper. And so the story went like this. The man had upset a local witch doctor and then met said witch doctor in a graveyard, bad spot. And then the witch doctor hexed him with a voodoo curse, splattered him with chicken blood, and then told him he would die of a lizard growing inside his abdomen. Ever since then, he had had poorly declining vital signs. So this surgeon was clever, understood the voodoo culture, and devised a plan. After sending off for a few supplies, he loudly announced that they would host a surgery, wheeled in the surgical instruments, and then delivered, with a low curtain in between, a surgery in front of patient and family. After a few moments into this performance, he gasped loudly and then theatrically held up over his head a live lizard. Would you believe that the patient, within 24 hours, was completely back to full health? Now, as crazy as the two different stories sound, the similarities are actually greater than the differences. So let's break down these two patients' dream realizations into three categories: dream, fact, and feeling. So for each of these two patients, they both exhibited a dream. And so what I mean by dream is any desire, small or great, any want that they would each have. They actually had the same dream. When you're in dire circumstances like this, the dream is simply to live. They wanted to live. Now, the facts of each were very, very different. The facts is what I'm talking about as evidence, like the action steps. These would be the tangibles in this event. So the facts differed as far as statistical analysis goes from blood splattering voodoo curses. But third piece would be the feelings. The feelings are the intangibles. They're emotions associated with the event. And the emotions were shockingly similar. Each patient exhibited a high feeling of normalcy around their ability to live. If you are into stats and you think you find a loophole, whether you're in Vegas playing blackjack or whether you're in the operating room having cancer, you think you're going to beat the odds. If you're into voodoo and there's a cursal reversal, of some sort, perceived or not, then you're going to beat the odds there and live as well. So if we're looking at this and we're trying to understand how can two patients both have the same dream realized but have such wildly different facts, what we're going to ask ourselves is how that could happen. My thesis to you tonight is that in dream realization, the power of feeling is much, much greater than the power of fact. So my name is Pete Thornton, and for approximately 20 years, I've studied this concept of dream realization as a science teacher, soccer coach, and software leader. And in standard protocols, you'll see that we focus on fact to the exclusion of feeling. So let me kind of tell you about each of these three professions I've been in. In teaching, we try to enable dreams on behalf of students, typically leading to grades. So to do so, we prescribe facts. Think of what you did every day in a classroom, which is like curriculums and assessments. And then if you look at the world's greatest teachers historically, they'll only ask you questions if you think about Socrates, or they'll speak to you in parables if you think about Jesus. In coaching, the dream would be victories, like athlete victories, wins for the team, for the individual. And so what we do in coaching is we prescribe facts such as training, drills, conditioning. Think about whatever you'd ever do at a practice every day after school. But if you'll look at the world's greatest coaches, think about a halftime talk from the world's greatest coaches if you've ever experienced one, or if you've just clicked on movies and you've seen Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday. No fact, all feeling. This is just a deliverance of feeling, and they'll come from behind victories all the time. And then if you look in software the dream is sales rep quota attainment. This is like in software sales. And so to that end, we prescribe digital onboarding. We prescribe enablement resources, battle cards, what have you. So if you've ever heard of something, and maybe not if you're not in the sales world, but there's something called the 90-day wonder. And the 90-day wonder is the person who comes in on day one, and for the first 3 months with knowing almost nothing, they way overshoot their quota and their abilities, and then promptly at 3 months, they tail off to average or below average. It's almost as if the less they know, the better, which is bad for my job. I'm in sales enablement. So is this just my observations and my professions over the course of some time, or is this actually like a more global phenomenon? So I dug a little deeper, and I looked across the world into different places where the power of feeling might be exhibited. So let's take a look at medicine, athletics, and into family life. So in medicine, you may have heard the power of feeling before because it's called the placebo effect. And the placebo effect is when you have a non-active treatment that actually delivers a very strong outcome. A famous placebo effect example is from the World War II battlefield surgical tents. They would bring in wounded soldiers, but they would be out of morphine. And so some of these more wise, streetwise nurses would actually take saline injections and give it to them because they're expecting something. And when they received that something, some of the soldiers, not all, but some, would go calm and comatose, and they would enable the surgery to happen, whether it was losing a leg or whatever gruesome, terrible World War II thing was happening. So that's placebo effect. Now in athletics, you might have heard of this because it's often called overachievement. And what overachievement means is the facts that are delivered, the facts of the athlete or the team do not indicate that they will do as well as they're able to do in that said sport. And so a popular example of this would be NFL quarterback Tom Brady. Tom Brady was the 199th round draft pick, and he is not physically gifted by like NFL standards. Like he can run, but it doesn't look good. Like, and it might not be good for his marriage right now. However, despite that, this man has won 7 Super Bowl championships. So his feeling of normalcy around championship outcomes is quite high. And then in family life, the power of feeling over fact is understood every day in what mothers do for their children. Hashtag mom life. But the ones that make the news are often called hysterical strength. So interestingly, in my hometown of Lawrenceville, Georgia, in 1982, the year I was born, there was a woman who heard a crash outside, and she looked outside to her horror to see her son lying unconscious under their Chevy Impala because the jack had slipped as he was working on it. She rushed outside and lifted up the Chevy Impala long enough for neighbors to come and drag her unconscious son out from under the Chevy Impala, and he lived. So hysterical strength, as you can imagine. That is all feeling, no facts. She's not repping Chevy Impalas at the gym every morning to prepare for this. So then, it's interesting that it makes the news, and I love those types of stories, but what I'm really concerned is for folks like you and I. I'm really concerned for, does it work, and can we harness that power for some type of good? So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to take a dream that you've had and see if we can break it down into its component parts and then see if this could maybe work for you or I. So let's just see what these 3 parts are: dream, fact, and feeling. So if you get your hands dirty with me real quick, think of a dream that you've had in your past that came true. And remember, a dream doesn't have to be an amazing big thing. This is just something that came from your soul. It was a want or a desire, and this was something that you got. So maybe some examples would be like purchased a car, you're a car person, got a car you wanted, got a new home or a first home, you proposed to somebody, they proposed to you, something that you wanted to have happen. You scored an amazing goal in a soccer game in my case. So what was that dream that you had, something that you got? Just kind of lock that in. All right, so after that, there's some facts associated to that dream. There's going to be some things that happened, some milestones along the way. There's going to be some outcomes. Somebody handed you the keys. You had to sign some paperwork. You walked through the house. So you smelled it for the first time. She said yes. It hit the back of the net. Crowd goes wild. Like whatever your example is, see if you can picture some of the milestones along the way. Those are your tangibles. Those are your facts. Those are your action steps. And lastly, let's look at the feelings. So the feelings are going to be obviously all the emotions associated to that. And you're going to have 2 distinctly different feelings about this. So the first feeling, I want you to think about when it happened, what was that emotion? How did you feel then? And how do you feel about that same event now? Because if you're anything like me, then it felt very, very like exciting maybe, like some form of excitement or highly emotional. You can't believe it happened. It was challenging and then it happened. And now, if you think back on it, it's probably very normal to you. It's probably meant to be something that seemed like it was always going to line up. The facts just lined up just so, just so. And this is where we get confused because we look backwards, we see all the facts lined up. You're like, oh yeah, of course, that was always going to happen. Like Tiffany was always going to have this business. Kenyatta was always going to be able to do what he does. Everybody associated with this tonight who's spoken about these concepts. But that feeling of normalcy that you now have about the thing that happened, I'm here to tell you that that feeling of normalcy, if you can harness it on the front end of a dream instead of just on the back end, is actually the secret to future dream realization. So this is tough though, right? So we're taking something that's already happened and we're like, yeah, that's normal, great. And then we're trying to pursue it in the future now. We're trying to kind of front load it out in front of us. So the question would be how to do that on a regular basis or how to do that intentionally at all. And so I have a method that I've come across. It's not mine, but I found it. And I call it building a dream machine for the things I like to do in my life. And so it goes like this, and I'd like to teach you to do it, so maybe you could do it, and then I have a selfish ask at the end. So the dream machine works like this. You imagine an event, you construct it in your mind, that if it were to come true, would imply that your dream had come true. For a simple example of this, you can think back on the dream that we went through. Whatever dream you were thinking of then, think about that very moment that it came true. Like as soon as you realized it, just think about what that event would have been. Who would have congratulated you? What would they have said? Where would you have been? Any sensory data that you can get, the smells, the taste, the touch, whatever it would happen to have been, the more vivid you can make it, the better. So you'll gather that up. And then once you have that event, it's nice if you're uninterrupted for a period of time, maybe before you drift off to sleep, you need to think about that event in all vividness, as deeply as you can, in an uninterrupted pattern, until you gather the feeling of normalcy to it. So you kind of get it? We're trying to take the feeling of normalcy from after you get something done, when you're like, yay, on to the next, and you take those 2 seconds to celebrate or not, and we're trying to front load it, do it before, and that's how building a dream machine actually works. So to make this maybe even more practical to you, and to garner a little bit of help, I'd like to tell you about a dream machine that I've had. And so this is a rather large dream machine, dream of mine, and it kind of goes through the stages of my life. So as I've moved through, I like to interact with a lot of people. I like to be part of teams, lead teams if it's applicable. And so over the course of time, like, oh man, I'd really like to have my own team somehow. Not on a soccer team anymore. Maybe you'll be part of a software team. So I thought, oh, I know. It'd be cool to own a business. You have a team there, a built-in team. And then I moved into software. Software, great people, cool culture. And so I was like, ooh, this business is going to be a software business. And then I moved into something called sales enablement. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be a software business that changes the way sales enablement is done. Because remember those 90-day wonders? Whoops, we might be doing it wrong. So I'm like, oh, I've got an idea. We'll do it this way. So this is a sales enablement business. Now, that's the dream. Okay, the facts of this dream are ridiculous. So with no time, funding, experience, we're just going to start a business. This is America. We're going to do what we want. All right? You've already heard about how difficult that is, so let's go through some of it. You're going to need a product. It's a software product. Do I know how to code? No. Do not know. Going to need pricing, a website. Going to need prospects who hopefully turn to customers. We'll need some employees. Going to need some letters. These letters are expensive to get too. You need an NDA, MSA, LLC. I don't even know what they mean, but you need them. It's all legal stuff. So it's quite overwhelming because if you know me, 6 years ago, I was a high school biology teacher, printing off resumes and wearing a baggy suit to try to go get a software job. So I understand that that might not be the route to take. So I thought, hey, why don't you go with your feeling? Why don't you build a dream machine for this? I'm like, all right, cool. So the dream machine looks like this, because this is the feeling. How am I going to get a feeling of normalcy? So in this realm, the way you would get a customer, because that's what a business to me would mean. You'd have to have all those things set up to even get a customer, your first customer. So if you're going to get a customer, we send out something called a DocuSign. DocuSign's like e-signature. And it comes back to you. We're all working remote, working from home, so it's just you and your little computer lab, and you're sitting there and you're waiting for an email to come back in, and it says completed. It's been signed. So that's what I'd be waiting for in email. I'm like, got it. All right, well, who am I going to share that with? Because a dream when you're alone is not a very powerful dream. I found that you need to incorporate other people into it. So it's more powerful if you can get some other people. And that's great, because I know who I'd tell. I'd tell my wife. And it would sound like this. It'd be like, hey, And I would just shout. It's got to be realistic, right? This is what's going to happen. Hey, we got it. All right, that's it. I will talk to her about it at dinner for like 48 hours beforehand, so she'll know what it is if she's even home. So there it is. I see the email come through. Hey, we got it. All right, and then after that, she comes down. She's very excited for me, great supporter. She comes down, start jumping, okay. And then, remember, this is my dream, so I'm inviting you in. Don't make fun. There's a song that's going to play. It used to be this song. It was a Montel Jordan, I think, song. And it was like, this is how we do it. And so that was the song every single time. That was back at a former company I was at. So now the song is a little bit different. Now the song is going to be, it's actually a remix of it too, so sorry I can't tell you all about it, but it's Biggie Smalls. It's a song called Juicy. So I'm going to listen to the first line of that song. Can anybody help me with the first line of Biggie Smalls' Juicy? It was all a dream. For the microphone, it was all a dream. Oh, it could keep going. Well, let's stop it there. So we're going to listen to that song, and we're going to dance around. So every night before I go to bed, or anytime I get a spare moment, I'll just nobody knows what I'm doing. Nobody knows how weird I am, right? Could be anywhere and do this. I'll close my eyes, and I see the DocuSign coming through, completed, signed. I have a customer. I have a business. Then it shows up, honey, hey, it happened. Great. She comes down. I'm like, have to listen to the song now. She's like, okay, I know the song, yeah. Like that. She'll dance to it, too. It's fine. And we listen to Biggie Smalls. It was all a dream. So that's the thing. Now, this works well for yourself. It works better on behalf of another. And here's why. You are literally getting out of your way because you're putting it in the hands of another. Oftentimes, people will call this prayer. It's just a very different version of it, right? So my ask of you, my selfish ask, I told you it's coming, is that if somewhere along the way, you don't know me, but if you would be like, oh, the guy who spoke, his name's Pete, he wants a DocuSign to come through and say completed, and then he's going to yell out to his wife, Kendall, hey, it happened, and then it was all a dream. I used to read right up my, and you just hear a little bit of that song, that's all. That's the only ask. And if you have a dream, I would, first of all, love to hear it anyway. I am at Coach Pete Thornton at Instagram. I am Pete Thornton on LinkedIn, or just, call my cell if you know me. So love to do that. To kind of summarize, a dream realization consists of 3 parts. It's a dream, it's fact, it's feeling. Dream, any desire. Fact, what do you have to do, the tangibles. For 99% of my career, I focused only on fact. Now, I highly recommend, at least initially, pursuing feeling. That means that you have something in your mind's eye that if it were to occur, would actualize this dream. It would prove to yourself and others, if necessary, that that dream had occurred. It makes the journey beautiful. You get to experience it the entire way. It makes it less grindy and hard. So to close out, one last thing, let me read this from my daughter, who wrote this as she was kind of waiting for me to come up here. And it says, "The dream machine is the power of life. You can do anything with it." Heart, heart, little ribbon thing. Thanks, guys, for your participation in my dream.